Why is there a black woman at this Pentagon party? Ugh, her smell is making me sick, Colton.
Hey, you. How many days since you last showered? Get out, you're making me sick.
She turned, calmly.
I'm a guest, sir.
Pamela almost choked.
Oh, please. You're just a guest of the welfare line.
Everyone laughed.
Check her bag, she's probably stuffing shrimp in there, like a starving stray dog.
Colton didn't lower his voice.
Little girl, let me be blunt. You don't belong here. Your kind cleans these floors. Get out before I call someone to drag you back where you belong.
She said nothing, picked up her glass of water, and smiled. Because in 14 minutes, a Black Hawk helicopter would land on the south lawn, and every mouth laughing right now would forget how to speak. 4:30 in the morning, Arlington, Virginia. The kind of quiet that only exists before the world decides to wake up. A small apartment on the third floor of a brick building. Nothing fancy, clean curtains, a worn Bible on the nightstand, a folded American flag in a shadow box on the wall, next to a row of photographs. A younger woman in dusty fatigues, standing with soldiers in places that didn't look anything like home. Wanda Turner sat on the edge of her bed. She didn't hit snooze, didn't reach for her phone. She just sat there for a moment, hands resting on her knees, breathing slow. Like someone who learned a long time ago that the day doesn't wait for you. She made her bed first, tight corners, hospital corners, the kind the military drills into your bones until your hands do it in your sleep, every single morning, no exceptions. Then coffee, a plain white mug, chipped at the rim, no sugar, no cream, just black, the way she'd been drinking it since her very first deployment 26 years ago. Bishop, a three-legged rescue mutt with one bad eye and a torn ear, limped over and pressed his nose against her ankle. She scratched behind his ears. "Morning, old man." He wagged what was left of his tail. She ironed her dress herself. A simple black dress bought off a clearance rack 2 years ago. No designer label, no sequins. She held it up to the window light, checked for wrinkles, and hung it on the door. Her phone buzzed once. A text from a contact saved only as Brooks. 4 words. "See you tonight, Commander." She read it, didn't reply. Slipped the phone into her purse and went back to feeding Bishop. This is who Wanda Turner was at 5 in the morning. Quiet, unhurried, ordinary. The kind of woman you'd walk right past on the street and never think about again. That was exactly the point. By 7 that evening, the Pentagon's Grand Hall looked like it had been dipped in liquid gold. Crystal chandeliers hung from 40-foot ceilings, throwing warm light across marble floors, so polished you could see your own reflection walking toward you. Round tables draped in white linen. Centerpieces of red roses and small American flags. The hum of 400 voices bouncing off ancient stone walls. Senators, 4-star generals, defense executives, their wives sparkling with diamonds that cost more than most people's homes. This was the annual Armed Forces Appreciation Gala, the most exclusive military-civilian event in Washington. You didn't buy a ticket to this, you got invited. And if you got invited, you were somebody. The man standing at the center of it all was Colton Davis, 58 years old. Silver hair swept back like a magazine cover, a deep tan that never faded because it came from a private island in the Bahamas. He wore a custom tuxedo that cost more than a sergeant's yearly salary, and he moved through the room like he had built it with his own 2 hands. In a way, he had. Ironclad Defense Systems, his company, held $2.8 billion in active Pentagon contracts. Drones, missiles, body armor. If it killed people or protected people, Colton's name was on the invoice. He shook hands with generals like they worked for him. He slapped senators on the back like old college buddies. And when he laughed, the entire room laughed with him. That's what money does. It doesn't just buy access, it buys obedience. His wife Pamela orbited beside him, blonde, thin, a smile that never quite reached her eyes. She scanned every woman in the room the way a predator scans a watering hole, measuring, ranking, dismissing one by one. And then there was Wanda. She arrived alone, no +1, no driver. She had taken the metro, the blue line, and walked 3 blocks in flats, carrying her heels in a canvas tote bag. At the guest desk, a young staffer looked at her dress, then at her face, then slowly back at her dress. "Are you sure you're on the list, ma'am?" Wanda smiled gently. "Wanda Turner." The staffer scrolled some more. Found it, buried at the very bottom. No VIP flag, no special notes. She handed Wanda a basic badge. No escort, no direction to the VIP section. Wanda clipped the badge to her dress and walked into the ballroom, alone. 400 people in that room. Not a single one of them looked up. She hadn't been in the ballroom 5 minutes before it started. Wanda walked toward the bar. Not the VIP bar, the regular one, tucked along the far wall where the lighting was dimmer and the crowd was thinner. She ordered water. Still, no ice. The bartender handed it to her without a second glance. No smile, no greeting. Just a glass pushed across the counter like she was barely worth the effort. She found a small standing table near the edge of the room and set her glass down. From here, she could see the whole ballroom spread out in front of her. The generals, with their rows of ribbons gleaming under the chandeliers. The senators whispering to lobbyists behind cupped hands. The wives comparing diamond bracelets. And in the center of it all, Colton Davis, holding court like a king who had never once in his entire life been told no. A group of 4 men stood at the next table over. Defense contractors by the look of them. Expensive suits, loud voices, heavy watches. The easy confidence of men who had never once questioned whether they belonged somewhere. One of them, a tall man with a red face and a bourbon in each hand, noticed Wanda first. He nudged the man beside him with his elbow. Hey, look, over there, by the bar." They all turned. What is she doing here? Maybe she's with the cleaning crew. Early shift, you think? In that dress? That's not a uniform. That's a Goodwill donation. The tall man laughed so hard his bourbon sloshed over the rim. No, she's probably somebody's little charity case. You know how these things work now. Every event needs at least one diversity hire standing in the corner so they can check the box. Check the box and take the photo. Then she goes right back to the bus stop where she came from. They didn't even bother lowering their voices. Not even a little. Wanda heard every single word. She didn't move, didn't flinch, didn't react. Just picked up her glass of water and took a slow, steady sip. Her hand didn't shake. Her jaw didn't tighten. Nothing. Then Colton arrived at the table. He had been making his rounds all evening, shaking hands, kissing cheeks, collecting compliments like a man filling his pockets with gold coins. When he reached the group of contractors, they welcomed him like a hero coming home from war. "Colton, great speech coming up tonight?" "Always," Colton grinned, straightening his cufflinks. "Somebody's got to remind these people who actually funds their little wars." Laughter all around, backslaps, clinking glasses. Then his eyes landed on Wanda, standing right there, 3 feet away. Quiet, still, holding her water like she had every right to be there. He stared at her the way you'd stare at a stain on a white tablecloth. "Excuse me." He didn't address her by name, didn't bother to ask. "This section is for invited guests of the gala, not the help." Wanda met his eyes, calm, steady. "I am a guest, sir." "You're a guest." Colton repeated it slowly, like the words tasted wrong in his mouth. He looked at the other men. Boys, she says she's a guest. More laughter, louder this time. One man nearly choked on his drink. Another contractor leaned in. Sweetheart, guests in this room write 7-figure checks. What did you write? A bus pass? Maybe a lottery ticket, someone added. That's about the only way her kind ever gets in here. Colton held up one hand, silencing the group like a conductor. He looked directly at Wanda. Not at her face, at her dress, her shoes, her plain badge with no VIP marking. He inventoried her piece by piece, like she was evidence of something shameful. Let me give you some free advice, he said, stepping closer. When you walk into a room you were never built for, it shows. Everything about you screams, wrong place, wrong time, wrong person. So do yourself a favor. Finish your little glass of water, take your sad little badge, and crawl back to whatever sad little life you came from, before somebody mistakes you for a trespasser and calls the real police. He smiled when he said it, that cold, polished smile that dares you to talk back. Wanda didn't talk back. She just nodded slowly, like she was folding every word into a file somewhere deep and safe. Thank you for the advice, sir, she said quietly. Colton blinked. He hadn't expected manners. It threw him off for half a beat. Then his arrogance rushed in to fill the gap. Smart girl, he said, turning his back. Now stay where you belong. But Colton wasn't done. Not even close. 20 minutes later, a Pentagon photographer was setting up the official Gala portrait in front of the grand staircase. This was the photograph that would appear on the Department of Defense website, across social media, in the annual report. The who's who of American military power, frozen in one frame. A young PR coordinator was arranging the group. Generals in the center, senators on the flanks, top defense executives filling the gaps. Pamela Davis had already positioned herself front and center, adjusting her diamond necklace, tilting her chin to catch the perfect light. Wanda stood at the edge of the group. She hadn't pushed her way in. A young aide had quietly gestured for her to step into the back row. She did. No fuss, no fanfare. Then Colton spotted her in the frame. He crossed the room in 4 hard strides, grabbed the photographer by the arm. Didn't whisper. Why would he? Whispering was for people who felt shame, and Colton Davis had never felt shame in his life. Get her out of the frame. Now. The photographer hesitated. Sir, she's on the... I don't care what list she's on. This is an official Department of Defense photograph. It represents the finest of American defense. Look at her. He jabbed a finger toward Wanda, like she was a stray that wandered in from the rain. Does that look like the finest of anything to you? The photographer said nothing. Move her. Now. Or I find somebody who will. The PR coordinator walked over to Wanda, a young woman, 25 at most. Her face was flushed deep red, her voice barely above a whisper. Ma'am, I'm so sorry. They want to adjust the arrangement. Would you mind stepping aside for just a moment? Wanda looked at her, saw the shame burning in the young woman's eyes, saw that this was not her choice. Of course, Wanda said softly, and stepped aside. The flash went off. 400 people in that room, and not one said wait. Not one said she should stay. Not one person opened their mouth and said, this is wrong. The worst, though, was Pamela. After the photo, Wanda walked toward the restroom hallway. Pamela intercepted her near the VIP lounge entrance, blocking the path like a velvet rope made entirely of spite. Oh, honey, no, no, no. Pamela held up one manicured hand. This area is for VIP guests and their spouses only. You need a VIP badge to come through here. Wanda held up her standard badge. Pamela looked at it like it was a food stamp. That's a general admission badge, sweetie. General admission. That means you stay in the general area, with the other general people. She said the word general 3 times, each one a little slower, each one more poisonous than the last. I just need the restroom, Wanda said. There's one downstairs, by the loading dock. I'm sure you'll feel more comfortable there. Wanda didn't move, didn't argue, just stood still. Pamela leaned closer, close enough for Wanda to smell the champagne on her breath and the perfume that cost more than rent. Let me tell you something, darling. I don't know who let you in tonight. Maybe somebody felt sorry for you. Maybe it's one of those cute little programs. But this world, this room, these people, this life, it is not for you. It was never for you. Standing here pretending doesn't make you one of us. It just makes you pathetic. She reached over to a passing waiter's tray, plucked a crumpled napkin off a dirty plate, and pressed it firmly into Wanda's hand. Here, since you're standing around doing nothing, make yourself useful. Table 9 needs clearing. Wanda looked at the napkin in her hand, looked at Pamela, looked at the napkin again. Then she folded it, neatly, precisely, the way someone folds a flag at a funeral. She placed it on the nearest table, turned, and walked away without a single word. Pamela watched her go with a smirk that could curdle milk. Then she turned back to her champagne circle and announced, loud enough for half the hallway to hear, I swear, they multiply every single year. The lights dimmed, a spotlight hit the podium, and the room went quiet, the way rooms go quiet when money is about to speak. Colton Davis buttoned his jacket, climbed the 3 steps to the stage, and gripped the microphone like he owned it, because in his mind, he did. He owned the mic. He owned the room. He owned every contract that kept the lights on in this building. Ladies and gentlemen, he began, flashing that magazine smile. Welcome to the finest gathering of American defense leadership in the world. Applause. Thunderous. Rehearsed. Tonight, we celebrate the men, and I do mean the men, who built the most powerful military machine in human history. The visionaries, the strategists, the deal makers. The people who understand that power isn't given, it's taken, and it's held by the people who deserve to hold it. A few women shifted in their seats. A black colonel near the back wall set his jaw so tight you could hear his teeth grind. Nobody corrected Colton. Nobody even tried. Now, I know the times are changing. He paused, loosened his grin into something sharper. They tell us we need to diversify, broaden the tent, lower the bar so more people can crawl over it. But I'll tell you what I tell my board every quarter. Excellence doesn't come from checking boxes. It comes from standards, high standards, the kind that built this country. And I think we all know exactly who I'm talking about. He let the words hang like smoke. Half the room clapped. The other half was too afraid to say a word. So tonight, let's raise a glass to merit, to strength, to the people in this room who actually earned their seat at this table. Not the ones who were handed one because somebody felt guilty. He lifted his champagne flute. 400 glasses rose to meet his. The crystal clinked like a chorus of agreement. And at the very back of the room, standing alone beyond the last row of tables, Wanda Turner held her glass of water. She didn't raise it. She didn't clap. She just watched. The way a surgeon watches a patient who doesn't know how sick they really are. After the speech, the crowd spilled onto the terrace. The night air was warm and heavy with the smell of cut grass and cologne. Cigar smoke curled from clusters of men leaning against the stone railing, ties loosened, voices louder now that the bourbon had done its work. Wanda stepped outside for air, found a quiet corner near a column, half hidden in shadow, breathing slow, letting the breeze cool the heat building behind her eyes. She didn't know Colton was already out there. He stood 15 feet away with two associates, backs to her, cigars glowing orange in the dark. Their voices carried across the stone terrace like they wanted the whole city to hear. "Did you see her inside?" Colton said, blowing smoke toward the sky. "That black woman by the bar?" "The one in the cheap dress?" one associate laughed. "How did she even get past the front desk?" "Who knows? Probably some new program. They hand out invitations like food stamps now to hit their diversity quota." Colton took a long drag, held it, let the smoke roll out slow. "I'll tell you what really bothers me. It's not that she's here. It's that they think putting someone like her in this room changes anything. You can put a dog in a suit. Doesn't make it a person. Still a dog." The men laughed. Low, ugly. The kind of laugh that sounds like permission to go further. "Next thing you know, they'll put one of them in charge of CENTCOM," Colton said. "That'll be the day I pull every contract and let this circus burn." "Careful, Colton. Walls have ears." "In this building? Please. I built half these walls. Nobody in here scares me." That's when Wanda stepped out of the shadow. She didn't storm out, didn't charge. She simply moved into the light, and the sound of her footstep on the stone made all three men freeze like they'd heard a gun cock behind them. Colton turned, saw her face. His cigar hand stopped halfway to his mouth. For 1/2 second, something flickered behind his eyes, something close to fear. But it died fast. Arrogance buried it before it could breathe. "Well," he smiled, slow, cold. "Eavesdropping now? That's not very ladylike." "I wasn't eavesdropping," Wanda said. Her voice was level, quiet, like a lake before a storm tears it apart. "You were just loud." The two associates exchanged a nervous glance. One stubbed out his cigar against the railing. The other took a full step back toward the door. But Colton didn't step back. He stepped forward, close enough for Wanda to see the vein pulsing in his temple and the champagne stain drying on his collar. "Listen carefully, sweetheart. I don't know your name. I don't care about your name. But I know exactly what you are. You're a nobody who wandered into a room full of somebodies, and you are way, way out of your depth." He pointed the burning end of his cigar at her face. "I'm giving you one last chance. Go home. Now. Because if I deal with you one more time tonight, it won't be with words." Wanda looked at the cigar, then at his face, then past him, at the two men who refused to meet her eyes. "Understood, sir," she said, and turned to walk inside. Colton watched her go, snorted, flicked ash over the railing. They really will let anything through that door. Inside the ballroom, it got worse. Colton found a security guard near the east corridor. Young white guy, crew cut, rented tuxedo, earpiece dangling from his collar. He looked like he'd rather be anywhere else on Earth. "See that woman?" Colton pointed at Wanda, standing alone near the exit, hands folded. "She's been harassing guests all night. I want her credentials checked. Now." The guard shifted. "Sir, I'd need a legitimate reason to—" "I just gave you a reason. She doesn't belong here. Loitering, eavesdropping. Multiple guests have raised serious concerns. Do your damn job before I call your supervisor and have you both removed." The guard walked over to Wanda, slowly, reluctantly, like a man walking toward something he knew was wrong but didn't have the courage to refuse. "Ma'am, I apologize. I need to see some identification." Wanda reached into her purse, pulled out a Virginia driver's license, handed it over without a single word. He radioed dispatch. Confirmation came back in under 30 seconds. Guest list, verified, authorized, Legal. He turned to tell Colton. But Colton was already standing 3 feet behind him, arms crossed, jaw clenched like a fist. Guest list means somebody made a clerical mistake. I want her moved to the lobby. Important people are in this room, and she is making them uncomfortable. Sir, she's been cleared. I didn't ask about her rights. Escort her out, or I make one phone call and both of you leave this building. Permanently. The guard looked at Wanda. Wanda looked at the guard. She saw it written across his face. The apology he couldn't say. The shame he couldn't swallow. "It's all right," she said softly. "I'll walk with you." And she walked. Slowly, calmly, head high, back straight, down the long marble corridor toward the lobby, her heels clicking against stone in a rhythm that sounded like a countdown. The guard stayed 2 steps behind. He couldn't bring himself to look at her, not once. Guests turned to watch. Some whispered behind their hands. Some found their shoes suddenly fascinating. A senator's wife clutched her pearls and leaned toward her husband. "See, I knew she wasn't supposed to be here." Not one person said stop. Not one stepped forward. 400 of the most powerful people in America watched a woman get escorted out for the crime of existing in their space. And Wanda kept walking. That same quiet expression on her face. That same unbreakable calm no one in this building had been able to crack all night. The lobby was cold. Fluorescent light buzzed faintly overhead. 2 plastic chairs pushed against a bare wall. The kind of room where people sit when they've been told they don't matter enough to stay. The guard gestured toward a chair. "Ma'am, I'm sorry. I'll try to sort this quickly." Wanda sat, crossed her ankles, folded her hands in her lap, neat, precise, like every movement was a decision made long before anyone here caught up. "Take your time," she said. He turned and disappeared down the corridor. His footsteps faded. And then it was just Wanda, alone in a cold lobby, surrounded by silence and the low hum of a building that had decided she didn't belong. She pulled out her phone, typed one short message, sent it, put the phone away. Then she looked up at the ceiling and exhaled, long and slow, like she'd been holding that single breath the entire evening. Somewhere outside, far away, the faint rhythmic pulse of rotor blades began cutting through the night sky. So quiet you'd miss it entirely if you weren't listening. But Wanda was listening. She had been listening all along. And the number she'd been counting down had finally reached 0. It started as a vibration, not a sound, a feeling, deep in the floor, in the walls, in the champagne glasses still sitting on white linen tables. A low, heavy pulse that made the chandeliers tremble and the silverware hum against the plates. Colton was mid-sentence, telling a senator about his next quarterly projection, when the windows rattled. He stopped, looked up. Everyone looked up. The sound grew, a rhythmic, thundering chop that swallowed every conversation in the room. Guests moved toward the terrace windows. Generals straightened. Senators frowned. Pamela grabbed Colton's arm hard enough to wrinkle his sleeve. "What the hell is that?" Outside, the south lawn lit up like a stadium. Floodlights snapped on in sequence. 1, 2, 3, 4, turning manicured grass into a white blaze against the dark. Trees bent sideways, napkins ripped off tables and spiraled into the night. And then they saw it. A UH-60 Blackhawk descending through the sky. Matte black, no markings. Military. The rotor wash hit the terrace like a warm hurricane, sending hair and ties flying in every direction. The noise was deafening. That deep, bone-rattling chop you feel in your teeth before you hear it in your ears. The helicopter touched down on the south lawn. Rotors slowed just enough for the doors to open. And then came the soldiers. 12 of them. Full-dress blues, white gloves, every button polished to a mirror shine. They moved in perfect formation, 6 on each side, and formed 2 parallel lines on the grass, creating a corridor from the helicopter to the terrace entrance. A red carpet unfurled between them. Not metaphorical. Real. Pinned at the edges by military precision. The entire gala had emptied onto the terrace. 400 people pressed against the stone railing, staring down in total silence. Nobody spoke a word. Nobody moved. Colton squinted through the floodlights. Who the hell is coming? The president? Nobody answered him. A figure stepped off the helicopter. Tall, broad-shouldered. A chest full of ribbons catching the floodlights like a wall of color. 4 stars gleaming on each shoulder. General Harold Brooks, the Army Chief of Staff. He walked down the red carpet between the honor guard. Slow, deliberate, boots silent on the red fabric. The soldiers stood frozen on either side, not a single muscle out of place. Brooks reached the terrace steps, climbed them one at a time. 400 guests parted like water before him. Generals stepped aside. Senators moved out of his way. Colton pressed himself against the railing, suddenly looking very, very small in his expensive tuxedo. Brooks didn't look at any of them. Not the generals, not the senators, not the defense executives, not Colton, not Pamela. He walked through the ballroom, past the abandoned champagne glasses, past the empty podium, past the photographer with his mouth hanging open, straight down the marble corridor toward the lobby, where Wanda Turner sat in a plastic chair with her hands folded in her lap. She saw him coming, took one breath, then rose, slowly, smoothly, like she'd done this 10,000 times before. General Brooks stopped 3 feet in front of her, drew himself to full height, shoulders back, chin level. He raised his right hand to his brow in a salute so crisp it could cut glass. He held it, steady, unblinking. The silence was absolute. You could hear the fluorescent light buzzing above them. You could hear her breath. She returned the salute. Clean. Textbook. Unhesitating. The kind that only comes from decades of muscle memory, earned in places most people will never see. Brooks lowered his hand and spoke. Not quietly. Loud enough for the crowd now filling the corridor entrance to hear every single word. Good evening, Deputy Secretary Turner. The President of the United States sends his regards and requests your presence at the Situation Room at 0600 hours. National Security Matter. Deputy Secretary Turner. The words hit that corridor like a bomb, detonating in slow motion. Wanda Turner, the quiet black woman in the simple black dress, the woman they'd called the help, shoved out of a photograph, handed a dirty napkin, and escorted to the lobby like a trespasser, was the Deputy Secretary of Defense of the United States of America, the second highest-ranking civilian in the entire Department of Defense, appointed personally by the President 9 months ago. She outranked every general in that building, every senator at that gala, and she outranked Colton Davis so completely that the distance between them couldn't be measured in titles, only in shame. Brooks turned to the crowd frozen in the corridor entrance, his voice carried like a blade. For those who don't know, and it is painfully clear some of you don't, Deputy Secretary Turner oversees every active contract, every personnel decision, and every dollar that flows through this department. She is your superior in every sense of that word. Nobody moved. Nobody breathed. And somewhere at the back of that crowd, Colton Davis stood, with his mouth open and his face the color of old ash. The champagne flute in his hand was shaking so hard the liquid spilled over the rim and ran down his wrist. He didn't notice. He couldn't move. He couldn't speak. The king of the room had just discovered he was standing in someone else's kingdom. And the queen had been watching the whole time. The corridor stayed silent for what felt like a full minute. Nobody moved. Nobody knew how. It was as if the air itself had turned to concrete and everyone in it had been sealed in place. Then, Colton took a step forward. A small step, shaky. The kind a man takes when his legs have stopped trusting his brain. His face had gone from red to white to a sickly gray. Sweat beaded along his hairline. His perfectly knotted tie suddenly looked like it was strangling him. Deputy Secretary. His voice cracked on the second word. He cleared his throat. Deputy Secretary Turner, there's been a terrible misunderstanding. I had absolutely no idea who you... Wanda raised one hand, barely above her waist, and Colton stopped talking, as if someone had pressed mute. She looked at him with the same calm eyes that had endured every insult all night. But something had shifted behind them now. Something cold. Something official. You had every idea, Mr. Davis, she said. Quiet. Level. Not angry. Worse than angry. Precise. You just didn't think it mattered. Colton opened his mouth. Nothing came out. You called me the help. You removed me from a photograph. You told me to crawl back where I came from. You pointed a lit cigar at my face and threatened me on that terrace. And then you had a security guard escort me out of a building that I helped run. She let every word settle like a stone dropping into still water. You didn't make a mistake tonight, Mr. Davis. You made a choice, over and over again. Colton's lip trembled. His hand reached out, some desperate instinct to find a handhold on a cliff he was already falling from. Please, if we could just discuss this privately. There is nothing private about what you did tonight. You humiliated me in front of 400 people. We will not be sitting down. That's when Pamela pushed through the crowd, heels clicking, smile plastered back in place. That practiced porcelain smile she wore like armor at every gala and country club brunch. She reached for Wanda's hand like they were old friends. Deputy Secretary, oh my goodness! If I had known for even 1 second who you were. You would have what? Wanda said. Treated me like a human being? Pamela's smile froze. Her hand hung in the empty air between them, unclaimed. You handed me a dirty napkin, Mrs. Davis. You told me to clear a table. You called me pathetic to my face. Wanda's voice never rose, not once. Are those things you only say to people who can't punish you for it? Pamela's mouth opened, closed, opened again. Nothing came out. Her eyes darted to Colton for help. He was just staring at the floor like it held instructions he couldn't read. Wanda turned to her aide, a woman who had been quietly observing from the ballroom all evening, documenting everything on a tablet. She'd been there the whole time, invisible, just like Wanda. Full compliance review of every active contract between the Department of Defense and Ironclad Defense Systems, effective immediately. Every deliverable, every invoice, every quality certification. Colton lurched forward. You can't do that. That's a $2.8 billion contract. There are procedures. I can, Wanda said, and I just did. She turned to the Pentagon security detail, not the rented Gala guards, but the real ones, with federal badges and sidearms, who had appeared the moment the Black Hawk touched down. Mr. Davis's temporary security clearance is revoked. Escort him and Mrs. Davis off the premises. They are not to return to any Department of Defense facility without written authorization from my office. 2 officers stepped forward, one on each side of Colton. He didn't resist. His legs were barely holding him upright. Pamela clutched his arm, her diamond bracelet catching the fluorescent light one final time as they were walked down the corridor toward the exit. The crowd parted for them, but this time, nobody looked away. Every single pair of eyes in that hallway watched Colton and Pamela Davis leave the building they had walked into like royalty just 3 hours earlier. No one said goodbye. No one wished them well. The only sound was their footsteps fading down the marble hall. And then silence. Just the low, distant hum of a Blackhawk idling on the south lawn, waiting to carry the real power in the room wherever she needed to go. The video hit the internet at 11:48 that night. A guest, nobody ever found out who, had been recording on their phone from the moment Colton made his first remark at the bar. The footage was shaky, the audio tinny, but every word was unmistakable. Every sneer, every laugh, every moment of cruelty uploaded to the world without a filter. By midnight, 10,000 views. By 6 a.m., 2 million. By the end of the following day, 40 million views and climbing, with absolutely no sign of slowing down. The clip that went the most viral wasn't even the worst one. It was the moment Pamela handed Wanda the dirty napkin and told her to clear a table. The casual cruelty of it, the smile, the turned back, the absolute certainty that nothing would ever come of it, hit a nerve no amount of spin could numb. The hashtag started before sunrise. 3 words, all caps. Hashtag, she outranked you. It trended nationally by 7 a.m., globally by noon. Within 48 hours, it was printed on t-shirts, spray painted on murals, and projected onto the side of a federal building in Washington. Veterans posted their own stories online. Mothers, teachers, doctors, all saying the same thing. This has happened to me. Not at a Pentagon gala, but in a hospital, in a courtroom, in a conference room, in a grocery store. Everywhere. Cable news ran the story around the clock. Every network, every panel. The footage looped behind talking heads, using words like systemic and accountability. Columnists crashed their own websites with the traffic. Late-night hosts opened with the clip and didn't try to be funny. There was nothing funny about it. One anchor played the moment Brooks saluted Wanda and had to stop mid-sentence because the control room was in tears. Colton's publicist issued a statement at 3 a.m., calling the incident a regrettable misunderstanding. By sunrise, it had been ratioed into oblivion. Nobody was buying it. Nobody was forgiving it. But the real damage wasn't on television. It was inside the Pentagon. 3 days after the gala, the Inspector General opened a formal investigation into ironclad defense systems. What started as a compliance review turned into something much larger and much darker than anyone anticipated. Auditors pulled records going back a full decade. What they found inside made the gala look like a minor footnote. Ironclad had been overbilling the Defense Department for years, millions in inflated invoices for equipment never delivered or delivered at half the contract quality. Maintenance logs falsified, inspection reports forged, a paper trail built to make substandard work look flawless on every page. And there was a pattern of racial discrimination buried in the procurement process. Minority-owned subcontractors had been systematically excluded from bids on ironclad projects. Internal emails showed Colton personally directing his team to keep the vendor list clean, a phrase that meant exactly what everyone thought it meant. But the worst discovery, the one that turned fraud into a criminal case, was the body armor. Ironclad held a $340 million contract to supply ballistic plate carriers to Army units overseas. Specs called for level 4 ceramic plates designed to stop a rifle round at close range. What they shipped were cheaper composites that cracked under high-velocity impact. On paper, they passed. In the field, death traps strapped to the chests of soldiers who trusted them with their lives. Whistleblowers. 3 engineers silenced or fired years earlier for raising concerns came forward within a week. They brought emails, memos, and buried lab results that executives had ordered destroyed. One had been terminated for refusing to approve plates he knew would fail. His letter cited performance issues. His only real crime was having a conscience in a company that didn't want one. Senator Diane Wilson, chair of the Armed Services Committee, called public hearings. She played the unedited Gala video on the Senate floor. Then she held up a defective plate and dropped it on her desk. It cracked in half. The sound echoed like a rifle shot. "This," she said, holding up the pieces, "is what Colton Davis sold to our soldiers. And this," she pointed at the frozen video behind her, "is how he treated the woman responsible for making sure it never happened again." The trial began 4 months later in Alexandria, Virginia. Contract fraud, conspiracy, false claims, wire fraud, willful violation of procurement regulations. The prosecution was methodical and devastating. Document after document, witness after witness, a mountain of evidence showing Colton didn't just cut corners. He built a company on the belief that nobody important would ever check. The moment that broke the courtroom came on day 6. Corporal Ellis Moore took the stand, 24 years old, a young black soldier from rural Georgia who deployed with Ironclad's defective armor on his chest. During a firefight, a round hit his plate carrier center mass. The plate shattered. The round went through. He survived, barely, but shrapnel severed 2 tendons in his left shoulder. He would never raise that arm again. He would never hold his daughter with both hands. He sat in dress uniform, his left arm motionless at his side. He looked directly at Colton Davis, 15 feet away at the defense table, in a suit that cost more than Ellis earned in a year. "He didn't just cheat the government," Ellis said. Steady, unblinking. "He almost killed me. He almost took me away from my little girl. And he would have never lost a single second of sleep over it." A juror in the front row wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. The entire courtroom was completely still. The jury deliberated less than 5 hours. Guilty. Every count. 18 years federal prison. No parole for 12. $640 million in restitution. Ironclad permanently debarred from all government contracts. Assets frozen pending civil suits from injured service members and their families. Pamela faced her own reckoning. Civil suits, total social exile, dropped from every board in Washington, uninvited from every gala and club she'd spent 20 years climbing into. Her bracelet seized in the asset freeze. Last seen leaving a bankruptcy hearing in a rented sedan, shielding her face from cameras that no longer cared about her name. And Wanda Turner didn't stop at one company. She pushed through sweeping reform of contractor oversight, anonymous integrity audits at military civilian events, mandatory ethics and diversity compliance for contracts exceeding $100 million, expanded whistleblower protections, guaranteeing legal immunity for anyone reporting fraud or discrimination in the defense supply chain, and a new requirement that every contractor bidding on federal defense work submit a verified history of workplace conduct, including any documented complaints of racial discrimination. The press called it the Turner Protocol. It passed unanimously. 6 weeks later, 4:30 in the morning, Arlington, Virginia. Same apartment, same brick building, same quiet that settles in before anyone is awake to ruin it. Wanda Turner sat on the edge of her bed, hands on her knees, breathing slow. The worn Bible still on the nightstand, the shadow box still on the wall, the photographs still in their row. She made her bed, tight corners, hospital corners, same as every single morning. Then coffee, same mug, same chip on the rim. No sugar, no cream, just black, the way she'd drunk it for 26 years. Bishop limped over and pressed his nose against her ankle. She scratched behind his ears. "Morning, old man." He wagged what was left of his tail. Nothing had changed in this apartment. The world outside had shifted. Headlines, hashtags, trial, sentencing, a reform that carried her name. But in here, Wanda Turner was who she had always been. Quiet, unhurried, ordinary. She ironed her blouse, held it to the window light, checked for wrinkles, hung it on the door. She took the metro, Blue Line, carried her heels in a tote bag, and walked 3 blocks to the Pentagon in flats. The morning air smelled like cut grass and something close to rain. Inside the building, things were different now. Not louder, not flashier, just different in the way that matters. People looked up when she walked past, not because they were afraid, because they saw her. A staff sergeant held a door open. "Good morning, ma'am." An analyst smiled in the hallway. An older general, 3 stars, someone who had been at the gala and said nothing, stopped her near the elevator. He didn't apologize. He looked her in the eye and said, "It won't happen again. Not on my watch." Then he walked away. Wanda watched him go, nodded once, kept walking. Near the East Corridor, the same corridor where a guard asked for her ID 6 weeks earlier, a young woman in uniform stepped into her path. A black lieutenant, 26 years old, short hair, pressed uniform. Eyes that held the kind of determination that only forms when someone has been told no their whole life and kept going anyway. "Ma'am?" She stood straight, hands behind her back. She looked like she'd rehearsed this since dawn. "I saw what happened. Everyone saw. And I wanted you to know. What you did mattered. Not just the gala, everything after. The hearings, the reform. It made me believe I belong here. That someone like me has a place in this building." Wanda looked at her for a long moment. Not as a deputy secretary. Not as a symbol or a headline. Just as one woman looking at another who needed to hear one true thing. "You always did," Wanda said. The lieutenant blinked. Her jaw tightened. She saluted. Not because protocol required it, but because respect did. Wanda returned it. Clean. Steady. And the young woman walked away with her shoulders a little higher than before. Wanda watched her disappear around the corner. Then she turned and kept walking. Same pace, same quiet, same steady rhythm of heels on marble that sounded less like a countdown now and more like something else entirely. Like a heartbeat. Steady, strong, going nowhere but forward. This story is fiction. But the disrespect Wanda faced, the assumptions, the contempt, the certainty that she didn't belong, is painfully real. It is documented in lawsuits and investigations and testimonies that fill filing cabinets in courthouses across this country. It happens in boardrooms, in hospitals, in courtrooms, at galas, every single day. The only fictional thing here is the helicopter. Everything else has already happened to someone you know. Maybe it happened to you. Power isn't always loud. Sometimes the most powerful person in the room is the one nobody notices, because the world has been trained to look right past them. Wanda didn't announce herself. She let the truth do it. And when the truth spoke, every assumption and every insult came crashing back on the people who made them. So here's my question for you. Have you ever been underestimated? And what did you do about it? Drop your story in the comments. I read every single one. If this hit you somewhere real, smash that like button. Share it with someone who needs to hear it. Subscribe so you don't miss the next one. Because we are not done telling these stories. Not even close.
You know what scares me? How fast people decide you are nothing. One look, that's all it takes. They see your clothes, they see the skin, and in 2 seconds, they've already written the whole story in their head before you even open your mouth. And the worst part, they're always wrong, every single time, because you can't see what someone carries inside them. You can't see their appearance, their strength, their story. You can't see any of that from the outside, but people don't care. They see what they want to see, and they treat you based on that instead of who you actually are. So stop deciding who people are before you know them. Stop assuming, stop looking at the outside and thinking you understand the inside, because one day you are going to look down at someone and find out they were looking down at you the whole time. And by then, it will be too late to take back a single word. Like, share and subscribe. Read stories, read justice every week. And remember, the loudest person in the room is usually trying to convince you of something. The quiet one already knows.